All right, I'm going to get started. This is Ask Me Anything. I've been a professional writer for 30 years. And I don't know how many of you are writing or publishing or wanting to write or publish, but I have lots of tricks of the trade and tips. I'm also a professor of journalism, which I've done for probably 20 years or so. And so there's a lot to share. And I'm just going to talk a little bit, but I think you can ask a question at any point and I can see your questions. So please jump in if there's something specific that you want to get to. But I'll just start by telling you a little bit about what I've done, my background. I started as a print reporter back in the day when we had to fax our stories in to places like the Village Voice, which no longer exists in New York, but I wrote for the LA Weekly, the LA Times Magazine, the Village Voice. I'm from LA, lived in New York for many years. And then I moved into magazines and wrote it feels like almost any magazine you can think of I've written for. Newspapers. I was a contributing writer with the Washington Post and the style section, and also Essence magazine. I have 4 books. My latest book is just out this month, The Girl in the Yellow Poncho. And, it's my first book that's not strictly journalistic. So it's it's a personal memoir, family memoir. And I didn't expect that to happen. I thought I was going to write a journalistic book, but it took a different shape and form, and it ended up being a memoir. So, surprise, but I'm excited. It's gotten attention and good mentions and best books from Vanity Fair. People magazine wrote something yesterday. Ms. Magazine, one of the most anticipated books for 2023. The Root, Kirkus, good reviews. So please check it out. I'm being told by friends that they're reading it like in a day or in a night. So that's a good sign. Nobody's falling asleep on it. So I've done some television, a little tiny bit of producing TV, more appearances on TV as a journalist, and I've done some radio. I produced for NPR for a bit and also did on-air commentaries. Digital, you're all in the digital world now, so digital has been also something that I've evolved into. I'm on Medium. Many of my, in the last more recent years, publications have been digital. I think my 2 pieces for Vanity Fair, well, one was in print, one was digital. My piece for the New Yorker, which was a few years ago, was digital only. So it's become more commonplace to get to sell pieces digitally than to be able to get in print. It's so much harder to get in print these days, right? Because the real estate is limited. But this was really intended to be an Ask Me Anything. So I really have a lot that I can tell you all. If anybody wants to jump in, put a question in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and ask a question. Had a lot of adventures in the publishing world. Selling books is also an area that I've written about for Medium. If you want to check that out, I've written about the difficulties of financing a book, which we're not really getting big advances from publishers. So I started thinking, and I wrote this piece for Medium that's on my profile about all the different ways that I've funded books. And I didn't realize until I started writing that piece that most of the books have been funded by other sources, not by the publisher. So that was kind of an eye-opener. And then, of course, after you publish, um, the books themselves aren't really what earn you income. In a lot of cases, at least in my case, what it was the speaking engagements. So getting listed with a speakers bureau to talk about your book at different places for nonprofits or universities, you know, wherever you can go to sort of spread your message is really a lot of times what pays more than the book um, royalties themselves. So that was an interesting discovery. I do like to talk about how to make a living at writing because I feel like, having taught journalism for so many years in journalism schools, I teach at Hofstra University now, and I taught at Columbia for 5 years. I've noticed that not a lot of people talk about the nitty-gritty ins and outs of how to sell your work and how to market your work. And that's been kind of surprising. I feel like I'm really one of the only ones that does that. So there's a lot, that we can talk about pitching, how to pitch ideas. I think that one of the pieces that I've discovered, I know you've heard this before, but it's so important, is relationships, connections. I mean, even now after 30 years, if I send a cold pitch to someone, I can almost guarantee you, no matter how good the idea is, they may not even see it. They may just delete it right away because they have no connection to me. They're taking too big of a risk to just suddenly assign a story to a stranger. And that's the reality. Really, almost the only way that I've gotten things done or gotten ahead or gotten positions or, been invited to write is through relationships. And so I can't emphasize that enough. If you know someone or if you can get to know people just very gradually, you can attend conferences, you can reach out on social media, but getting to know people, then when you send your pitches, there's a connection and there's a much more likelihood of getting a response and having a conversation. Well, this one doesn't quite work for us right now, but maybe later, or do you have other ideas you could send that we can talk about? Pitching is a conversation. It's never just a quick yes, almost never. It's a quick no, but it's almost never a quick yes. And there's a lot of back and forth. And so people tend to want to have these conversations with people that they're at least familiar with or a friend of a friend. So we can talk about pitching. I'm not seeing any questions. I'm still wondering if anyone wants to jump in and put one in the chat or just or raise your hand, because this is Ask Me Anything. So let me see. I also wanted to tell you, for those of you who don't know, about a really special website. It's called Who Pays Writers. And if you go there, you can actually see what the rates are. Almost all the publications you can think of are listed there. And that's really important if you're someone who's actually trying to make a living at this. Another really good source that I've always used is called the Writer's Market. It's a big book, comes out every year. You can look on Amazon. Writer's Market lists pretty much from the tiniest little magazine in Iowa to, the big ones, what they're looking for, how to pitch them, how much they pay, all that good stuff. It's a big fat book, Writer's Market. So we've talked about pitching and relationships. Real estate in print is not really there. So, we want to get used to the idea of publishing digitally, or, getting started in a smaller print publication just to build up your clips. I don't know how many of you have experience in publishing. So, stop me if there's a question, if there's anything, but clips are your published pieces that have your byline on them. We call them clips because you used to clip them out of the newspaper and, you know, build a folder of clips. And editors want to see your clips. They want to see what you've published under your own name. So building up your clips is really important. Medium is great. Medium is amazing. Medium, you know, used to pay writers. I'm sure some of you know there was a different format in the beginning, and that's how I got started with Medium. But now that they don't, I've also found that it's still just a great place to showcase your work. You know, a lot of the pieces that maybe don't make it in to another magazine, or you don't have the time to pitch them around, you just want to put them up and get them out there. Medium is really good for that. And especially those of us now who write in-depth kind of pieces, you know, sometimes those don't end up landing, but they don't find a home. And you, after all of this reporting and research that you've done, you don't want it just to go to waste. So if you don't have a blog, or if your blog is on Medium, that's the place to put it. So Medium is a great place to go. I was going to say it's not considered, you know, a bylined clip is something that is vetted by editors. So if you want to publish for, you know, mainstream outlets, I was going to just name, you know, whatever, Entertainment Weekly, Vanity Fair, the New Yorker. New Yorker is almost impossible to get through to, but anyway, wherever you want to publish, they're looking for bylined clips. So clips that have, you know, been published through an editorial process. So Medium, you know, and I can tell you this, having sat on the other side as an editor, Medium clips will not qualify for that. You really want to build up your resume and your clip file so that it shows that you've published everywhere. Yes, you have a blog and it's great and you have a great following, and that's all wonderful. But you've also published in places that are vetted by an editorial process, and people have read your work, they've fact checked it, they've copy edited it, and you know it's appeared in that way. Books are another whole different story. So I just wish I knew what you all were curious to know about, if it's digital, magazines, online, or books. I can talk about all of it. I guess I would say that, you know, finding an agent is the first step if you want to publish in a traditional publishing house. Now, that's not the way for everybody. Some people just choose to self-publish, and some people do very well at that. Again, publishing in a traditional house is one of those things that shows that your work has been vetted through an editorial process. So it does carry a certain kind of different cachet with it. That's changing. Self-publishing is respected nowadays, but it's still not quite the same thing as going through, you know, one of the houses. Even if it's a smaller or independent house or a university press, it still has a very different process than self-publishing, right? So it really depends on what your goals are, how you want to distribute your work, how you want to be seen, who your audience is, and really, what is it that you want to say? Because if you have something that's closer to expertise, right? Do you have any kind of working experience in your topic? Have you worked at a nonprofit for many years and you know about a certain issue? Or are you, you know, a practicing psychologist and you have something to say along those lines? Are you an academic or scholar? If you have an area of expertise like that, then your brand can be much bigger than just a book or an article, right? You start to build your name as someone who can really speak to this issue in a number of ways, on TV, on radio, I don't see any questions. Not sure. Okay, sorry, I'm just getting a message. Oh, okay, in review. Yeah, I'm looking for the questions. I wish I could see them. Hmm. That person who wrote, maybe you could just email the question to me real quick. I'm going to put up, can you all see my, in the chat, I'm going to put up my email. So if you have anything, please, please, please just send it by email and I'll get it right away and I'll answer. So in case you can't see it, my email is Kristal, Kristal.Zook at Hofstra, HOFSTRA.edu. Questions. All right. So while we're waiting for those, just continuing on, I've given you two really important websites that, or actually one really important website, which is Who Pays Writers. I'll put that here too. And then I hope you can see the chat. Let me know. And then Writer's Market, the book, has every kind of publication you could imagine. And it's really good for the smaller ones too. Like say you want to write about birds. You can actually find like a birding magazine or something like that where you can get started, you know, in a smaller venue, but you can get published and get an actual edited clip. Okay. Michelle asks, I have a book that's ready for an editor, but as a self-publishing new author, I'm uncertain how to find a quality editor. Do you have any recommendations on how to find and vet an editor for fiction? That's a great question. I think, again, through friends, if you're part of a writers group, and I definitely think for fiction especially, Michelle, I'm not really good with writers groups. I haven't been, but that's a mistake. I should have been more in touch with other writers and, you know, reading groups where you give everybody pages and everybody shares. But writers groups can help with that too. They can help with agents, they can help with editors. And then of course you just check them out online and make sure that, you know, they have credentials. But I think through those kinds of relationships, if you're not sure where to get started with a writers group, I would say go to a conference. You know, there's every kind of good fiction conference. So if it's like historical fiction or romance fiction, you could even choose a conference that's specific to what you're doing. And so that's really what I would suggest. Also retreats, if you can get away to like a writer's retreat, all of those places are just amazing to network. And again, I'm not good at it. I haven't done enough and I've regretted it because that's where people really network and build strong connections. Okay, I'm told that you can't see the chat on my screen. So the only thing I think that I put up there was just the website, my email, kristal.zook@hofstra.edu. You can just look up Hofstra, look up Zook, and it'll pop right up. And then the website Who Pays Writers is there. Okay, thank you, Mary. I appreciate the compliment. Karina asked, of all the success you've had as a writer in multiple formats, what has felt most meaningful to you over the long term? Asking as a writer who started to generate interest in my writing, but burnt out and began focusing on my full-time career rather than writing and feeling guilty about it. I'm interested in how I can re-enter in a meaningful way. Wow, that is a loaded question. I hear you. We all have experienced burnout in some way. I think as a journalist, I got really burnout when I wasn't able to do a story that I really thought was important with the Washington Post and nobody was hearing me. So I actually had to leave the country and I left and taught in Australia. Long story, but I just had to get away and get out of there. There have been many points in my career when I felt that burnout and just felt like I wasn't being heard. Here's my advice to you, Karina, and to everybody, and I can't say this strongly enough. Write every day in a journal, not for anybody else, just for yourself. For me, it was morning pages, what Natalie Goldberg calls morning pages. Natalie Goldberg to me is a genius. She wrote Writing Down the Bones. If you haven't read it, pick up Writing Down the Bones. She's the reason I wrote my first book. She says, morning pages, as soon as you wake up, you have that wonderful creative dream space, dream mind still, and a lot of the things are brewing in there, a lot of creativity. Just put it all down. Don't correct the grammar, don't edit it, just get it all down. And then later you'll find that there are little tiny gems in your journals. Most of it's crap, right? But you're going to go back later and you're going to find pieces that you can expand and build into something. I just think the best cure for burnout is to do it for yourself. You have a hunger to write, do it for yourself first, and then later think about publishing. I hope that's helpful. This book that's out right now, The Girl in the Yellow Poncho, could not have been written if I didn't keep a journal, because so much of those memories was in there that I'd completely forgotten about or blocked. And so journals are just invaluable. Tracy asked, how do you build your portfolio? Do you recommend a website, LinkedIn? Where do we put our clips together? That's a great question. It is important to have something online. So you definitely want a website. I would say, even in addition to your Medium page, you want a website to showcase everything really nicely. LinkedIn is good too. You just want, when people Google you, you want things to pop up that you want to pop up. You don't want any old college pictures to pop up or something that's not about your writing. So getting a lot of activity on your Medium page, your website, or your LinkedIn will ensure that those pop up first and that people can easily find you and find your writing. So it's really that simple. We used to have folders of our clips, hard copies, and you give them to an editor. That's gone. Everything is online somewhere. So I hope that's helpful, Tracy. Brent has a question. It seems like writing about topics that readers already want to know about is easier, but writing about topics that readers don't already know or care about is more difficult. Very true. Do you have any advice or anecdotes about writing about topics that were initially new to your readers? Okay. Yes, I do. I wrote for Essence magazine, which is the largest publication for Black women in the world, for many years. And I'm biracial myself. And I wrote about social justice issues, lead poisoning in the water in Anniston, Alabama, at a time when people weren't really talking about that as much. I wrote about AIDS. I wrote about, just social justice issues that were really pressing, that I felt were pressing. And I remember an editor said they didn't want so many sad stories. But then I did find an editor later who came on board, and she had worked for the UN, and she became editor-in-chief, and she hired me to contribute. And she said, you're going to be our social justice writer. And she sent me to Mississippi and Alabama and everywhere I wanted to go to write about, serious stories with an impact. Those stories later became part of my book, Black Women's Lives, Stories of Power and Pain. And that's probably, besides this memoir that I've just written, that's the most important book to me in my career. I'm trying to get it, if you look on Amazon, it's not available very easily, but I'm trying to get it back in print, Black Women's Lives 20 years later. Those stories are still meaningful to me, it's still powerful. So I would say, Brent, just believe in what you're doing and keep pushing, even if you have to put it away in a drawer for a little while, which happened to me, and you pull it back out later when you find the right outlet or the right, editor. Kathy says, do you have any recommendations for finding a literary agent? A very good question. Again, those relationships and connections, I'm just going to tell you a quick anecdote. I know we're almost out of time, but a friend referred me to his agent like 20 years ago. And for some reason, I don't think I looked her up, or I looked her up, but I didn't really pursue it. And I had a bad experience with an agent after that. And then I said, I'm just not going to have an agent. I'm just going to go it on my own. Big mistake. I probably lost 15 years when I could have been selling books, and I just wasn't. Big mistake. 20 years later, I go back to the one that the friend had told me about 20 years earlier. We had even had lunch. I just didn't pursue it. And she hooked me up with somebody in her agency who is now my agent, and she's wonderful. So relationships. Again, ask your friends. If you don't have writing friends, get in those conferences and writing groups so that you do have them. And that's really the best way. Everything, whether it's my agent or my speakers bureau, has all come through friends and relationships. My speakers bureau probably wouldn't have taken me on because I'm small potatoes compared to the people that they have. But they took me on because a friend who is big potatoes recommended me. And so I can't emphasize that enough. Amy says, you mentioned you had a piece in both Vanity Fair print magazine and online. Did you have to approach the print article differently, or was the article written neutrally and it just ended up in print? You know, that's really just up to editors. And you don't really know what they're going to do, and you just can't really predict it. You just have to do the best, writing that you can and hope that it gets that valuable real estate in print. But I mean, then again, it's okay if it doesn't. The digital world is growing and expanding, and if you're only in online, you can make the most of it as well. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, Amy. I would say just the harder part is getting into Vanity Fair, whether it's print or online. And again, that happened to me through a relationship with someone. I said, do you know any editors at Vanity Fair? And she gave me the name of someone that she knew. So I couldn't have cold pitched them. I don't think I would have gotten in that way. Erwin asks, should a memoir link life stories to lessons learned through life's journey? Absolutely. That's exactly, I think, the purpose of a memoir. The more universal, the better. I mentioned Natalie Goldberg earlier. Please pick up Writing Down the Bones. Natalie Goldberg is amazing, and she talks about universal human emotions. A memoir has to touch on those because we all have fear, we all have disappointment, pain, love, yearnings. We all have these things, and so a memoir can't be so specific that it's only about, I went scuba diving and I met a dolphin, or I don't know. Dolphins are in my book, actually. I did meet a dolphin, but it can't just be about that. What's the universal theme or the idea? I know that we're out of time. I'm going to try to get to, there's a lot of questions. I'm just going to maybe do one more because I have another session. Please hop into my other session it's actually at 10. It's actually right now. If you can, it's talking about my new book and multiracial identity and memoir. So any of you with memoir questions, please pop in and ask. I think I should, let's see. I'm just going to do one more. Ahmed, in our world where content is everywhere, how to be visible and being impactful. That's, yeah. I think that's what Medium is doing, is now shifting to showcase people who really are hoping to, have a message and a deeper meaning in their writing and not just clickbait. And so I'd say look for those outlets that take you seriously and that, are interested in really promoting the work that you do. So I hope that's helpful, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And I hope to see you in my next session, which is right now, Invisible Identities. Bye. Thank you.